All right, I've got some great games for you. I think you'll enjoy them at any rate, and some changes to the deck. So, been trying to adapt and waiting to figure out exactly what the format was going to look like for as long as I could before making a video and get as much testing as I could in. I got some testing with Keep Flying the other day. I've been practicing with Brian a little bit, mostly through discussion in that case. And I actually played in Saturday's event today as well as did many practice games. And the deck's been kind of all over the place because I was looking for a replacement Winter Orb, and there just isn't one. I mean, I tried Static Orb, it just doesn't do exactly what you want. But when I was trying Static Orb, I thought I'd combo it with Opposition just because it only takes like a tiny handful of creatures. Breya and two flyers would tap both cards that they untap with the Static Orb, and then the last with two creatures, and the third creature would tap the Static Orb itself, so you could just kind of lock somebody out with just Breya, Opposition, and Orb. The problem, what I found though, is if you get Opposition out, you probably don't need the Orb. Like, it was kind of redundant, and if you don't get Opposition out, the Orb isn't that great. So I realized that the key card in that was Opposition. Unfortunately, that means there isn't a lockout card in artifacts to go get. There's nothing to fetch with Whir against like the blue decks. It's very, very hard to deal with the blue combo decks because they just don't tap mana. They just play lands every turn until the turn that they cast High Tide, and then maybe they'll try to do something at the end of your turn to get you to tap down, and then they High Tide and go off. And so without Winter Orb, well, good luck. But I have found that overall, I think the deck still does very well against blue, just because what I had to do in response to that was adapt by increasing the number of counter spells. So I added Stubborn Denial in there. I put Daze back in. It had been out for a little while. It made its way back into the deck. So a couple extra counters and some more fast mana. Now, Ancient Tomb left the format, so Mishra's Workshop came back in, as I'm sure you're aware. So as a nod to Mishra's Workshop, and also Mox Diamond left. So Mox Diamond was a rainbow-colored artifact producer, artifact that produced mana, and so we need a replacement for that. And the two best that also happen to work with Mishra's Workshop are these two here, Coalition Relic and Chromatic Lantern. So if you go Shop Lantern or Shop Relic, it's one of the best draws you can have. Whether or not you also make a 1-drop off that, or just charge, or whatever you do at that point, you're starting off. It's kind of one of the best starts you can get in the deck. So alternately shop into some signets and stuff is also quite good. Or shop just can pay, you may not realize this, but it can pay Breya's tax. So that allows you to play multiple 1.5 deaths on Breya. So basically, if Breya dies, you play a shop, you can replay it. They kill it a second time, you play a land, you can replay it a third time. Off just the one workshop followed by one land, which is extremely, extremely good. So for all those reasons, it's in. The other card that might jump out at you is this new one, Karn, Scion of Urza. So I played all day, and I'm serious, I played all day looking to see how good this card was, and I never drew it. Not in a single game did I even draw it, unless it was in an opening hand that I mulliganed. However, I finally drew it in the very last game I'm going to show you, and you can see how good it is for yourself. So without further ado, let's get into the actual gameplay. And we'll take a look at how things went. I want to point something out before I continue, though. In the constructed tournaments leagues, 24 active members of the friendly Commander League. It's no longer the competitive 1v1 Commander League. The prize structure super sucks. I calculated that they removed a grand total of 12 packs, which were being given out, distributed amongst whoever won in the competitive league. So if you actually look at the entry fee was higher, but the rewards were higher, so that was a wash. And everything else, like the way that it broke down, was that in the friendly league, they hand out 10 more points to the lowest, like somebody who goes like 0-1 drop. They get 10 points as a rebate. In exchange for that value, they shaved, I think it was 10 or 12, a dozen prizes off the leaders at the top. So for that reason, a lot of people have lost interest in it, I think. And then on top of that, the terrible ban list. And I actually joined the league and tried to play, but look how anemic it is. There's 3 matches that have been won on a Saturday. Only 24 active players. And although I did join it, I sat for 12 minutes waiting for a player before I finally gave up. I never got a game won and I just dropped out of it. So League's in a really bad state, probably because Commander is in the 1v1 format. Like with every round of bans, they make the format suck worse and worse and worse. And now on top of that, they made the prizes worse. So I don't know how much longer this format is, honestly. And it's a shame because it started out like with a format that had some potential, and then they just gone bonkers and turned it into some kind of weird, like the format started out similar to Vintage. They decided, no, that's not good enough, let's make it more like Legacy, and now it plays out, they decided that wasn't good enough, and now it plays out like it's a modern format. So they're completely bastardizing what Commander actually is, which is it's an actually eternal format. So it's like modern with dual lands now. But anyway, we don't need to go to collection. Let's go and take a look at constructed tournaments. I think it's going to be back here, and I did all right with the prize here, but well, you'll see something happened that was very disappointing, and I'll show you what that is. I actually had to do, unfortunately, I had to do a report because it wasn't right. So here it is, Premier with top 8. I went 4-2. And here's all my opponents, and let's take a look at how the game's played out. And then I will run out for you the game where I actually drew Karn. I'll run through the rest of the games, and you can see there's a loss in there, and you can see, well, you'll see a couple of losses in here, so you'll get to see what that looks like. People do request that as well. So round 1 is against TKC 55, and he's playing Teferi, and I make a horrendous mistake in this game. Totally my game to win. Luckily, I'm able to dig my way out of it, but this was like, it was an amazing win that was only amazing because it should have been a loss, and it was only a loss because of how badly I screwed up. So my opponent has Get Probed me, and I have some thinking to do because I could try to run out this Dark Confidant, or I drew a Spell Pierce that he doesn't know about. So I could try to run out the Signet and then follow it up with a Confidant protected by a Pierce. That sounds a lot better to me, so I'm going to go that route. Opponent negates the Signet that he knows of. Now, he might not have had a counter for the Confidant if negate was his only one, but I don't think so. Anyway, on his next turn he cycles Cloud of Fairies digging for land, so this is my game to win, right? The blue mage has missed a land dropped on turn 3. I have no idea why he kept that, so I'm going to get a Confidant down with the Pierce to protect it. I'm going to place Twisted Image on it. I have to pause and read for a while, and he's digging for cards is what he's doing. Great way to kill a Bird of Paradise, though, I guess. Anyway, his land drop is Temple of the False God. Not good for him, obviously. So I'm drawing extra cards, producing tons of mana. I get a Wayfarer who on his own can often just beat a blue mage. And now I'm running both two little humans that are going to make this a pretty hard game for my opponent to win. My opponent cycles Censor and uses it to find more mana. He's getting close to Temple of the False God, so I want to get that off the board. Fortunately, Weather Wayfarer will do that for me quite nicely. Unless we bug out. Please don't bug out. This was a great game. I haven't actually tested these because I couldn't, because the tournament was playing through its top 8 and it wouldn't allow me to replay games that even though I was no longer in the event, which is a little strange. But anyway, so I get a Wasteland is Temple right here. I mean, he is missing mana drops. The Temple could do nothing, but I don't want to take a chance if he draws an island and suddenly it turns into 3 mana. That's not going to be a good situation now. The only problem I'm having here is, so I was a little worried about maybe running Confidant into a Snapcaster so I just don't swing there. And he plays a Repulse. He's digging for mana and potentially stopping me from getting a card, so that's where the Pierce is going to happen. But now shields are down. I just haven't had too much luck here, so I'm going to go ahead and use the Tithe trick with Wayfarer and go get Throne. And here's where I get a little bit greedy, and I'm going to pay big time for it. So all I had to do here was end the turn and then Teachings at the end of my opponent's turn if I wanted to go off. I didn't really need the extra card from the Monarch, and I'm going to pay big time with that High Tide into Teferi, into, holy crap, this is not good. Stasis Time Spiral, my goodness. That is gross. What the heck am I going to do now? My opponent can just keep paying the upkeep on Stasis with Teferi. Now the good thing is, so if you notice though, I drew a Pithing Needle, and I was told that it rhymes with Sith, so Pith, that was the question I had in the previous video. So a Pithing Needle, and If my opponent taps mana to counter this and uses Basalt Monolith and an island, something like that, then I am basically sunk. But if he taps 2 blue to counter it, then I get out from under the stasis. He does not do anything, so I just lock down Teferi. Now he's going to pay upkeep, and he's going to try to... I cannot attack Teferi again, so he's trying to kill me with my own Dark Confidant. He would have to have a lot of land drops, so that seems kind of unlikely, but I can definitely, like, if I'm him, that's exactly what I'd be doing. And I make some mistakes that help him along even further. I've already messed up by doing the end of turn become the monarch instead of sitting on a counter when I already had dominance on the game. Big mistake. So just greedy is what it was. And now you'll see I make another mistake here. I'm thinking I'll throw away the Daimler Aqueduct because it comes into play tap, which is stupid because I don't have a land in my hand. So if I played it next turn and I don't find a land, that guarantees that I can pick up a land and then play an untapped land, which is important. My opponent hits his land drop and passes. Because I need to get enough mana into play I want to get a forbid, because if my opponent finds like a boomerang effect and is able to bounce that stasis at the end of my turn, then this game's 100% over. Or, more likely, it would just bounce Pithing Needle and then untap all of his mana and then protect it on the way down. All of which would be game over. So I'm like terrified that's going to happen, and I don't draw a land here. I don't float Ancestral, incidentally, because that's crazy. That would be trying to get even more cards, which I don't need. What I need is lands, and I don't need to be killing lands in order to get a land. So not going to do that. So I pretty much have to just say done, because I didn't keep that Daimler. Very, very stupid. Alright, so I've got to throw away some more cards. So now I'm just throwing away cards that are very mana intensive or slow. You know, Ancestral, it's a great card and everything, but it's super slow. I've got I can't afford to spend the mana. I'm drawing, what, 3 cards per turn. I don't need more cards. What I need is freaking mana. And what I'm hitting with Dark Confidant is things that are killing me. My opponent is hitting a land drop every single turn. So he actually could kill me or find a bounce spell and win any time here. So I'm like super nervous about this situation. Stasis is such a neat card because if it's actually played, oh my gosh, and I hit a Batter Skull. So you can see I have Perplex, if you are perplexed as to why that's in there. It is a counter spell that is really good on an early commander, because if it's their commander, you can just counter it with Perplex, and what are they going to do? Mind twist themselves to get their commander out? Of course not. So it's really good early as a counter if that's what you want. But then later on, you can transmute it, and in this deck, it transmutes for, at 3, there's so many good cards. So it transmutes for, so I drew the Tundra off of the Monarch if you're wondering why I didn't play it there. But it transmutes for, you know, Sword of Feast and Famine, Crucible, Toxic Deluge, so this is like having 2 Toxic Deluges, and as a blue instant, it's a Toxic Deluge transmute that you can Merchant Scroll for, which is really nice. Look at this, I'm dying, I'm at 7 now, it's so bad. And he is just content to sit there and watch me die to stasis. Anyway, so pardon me, that was the thinking behind Perplex. I have since replaced it with additional mana sources to run, and look at that wonderful card to find off the Pithing Needle there. Finally a way out of this trap. My opponent hits land drop. I don't know how many land drops is that? That's 9? 9? It's not good. Anyway, opponent's hitting land drops like endlessly, and if not for that Skull Clamp, I would probably be dead here. For all I know, I need to drop to 3 and he just Psionic Blast me or something. Well, luckily I didn't drop to 3 here, but I'd like to wait longer and risk, like, get another land down and then try to cast Pithing Needle and then counter. But I realize that if my opponent actually uses mana to counter this, then it's going to be fine, right? So I decide, so I'm going to throw away like all this slow stuff. And Anguish Unmaking is the other card, by the way, that's also artifact mana now. And finally my opponent lets his stasis go. I'm not sure why he chose to do it there. He leads off with a Slay of Hand, and does he have anything? Because if he has a time walk here, that's the other way. Like, you let the stasis go, and then you play time walk, take another turn, and then untap all your permanents and go to town. But because of that sleight of hand there, and all the time walks costing at least 5, I drew that daze, and I'm feeling much more comfortable, especially my opponent doesn't know about it. But instead, he actually does nothing. If he had also, he could have frantic searched his way into getting more islands. Like, there's a lot of things he could have done. So I got really, really lucky there that my screw up didn't just completely cost me the game. But I've been holding an Armageddon since forever, and at this point I built up a pretty decent hand. And I thought about how I wanted to run this out. I can play the Darksteel Citadel because I'm an Armageddon, but he won't die, so that just gives me more mana ahead of time. Excuse me. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to send Trinket Mage at Teferi, because if he gets the Pithing Needle off the board, I don't want Teferi on the board. But then after that, I also want to do, now the other mistake, okay, so I made another huge mistake, and it was right here. So the correct play for me was, prior to attacking, I needed to kill the Basalt Monolith. Then, if I make a play, my opponent only has 2 mana, and Daze is potentially turned on. Instead, I get so eager to kill Teferi, because thing's been spooking me the whole time, but I attack first. And now Daretti could kill a Monolith, but he can just float mana in response. So I decide I'm not going to bother with it, and feeling really stupid here, because if he wins the game because of that error after all that I went through to try to get back in the game, I'll be super bummed. So I go for Armageddon, and he taps 5 mana. What's going on here? This is not good. Instead, he decides to pay a Force Well. I thought I was going to be able to daze him, and his other counters Mystic Confluence. I am so lucky. Like, twice I was saved from my own stupidity in this game. So that was the first game of the day, and I was feeling really sheepish, but luckily it all turned out. But I was feeling like, oh man, do I even want to make a video of how badly I played that game? But truth is, I mean, I did come out ahead, and it is important to, I think those videos are just as important at times, and I know you all been asking to see me make mistakes. So there's one I made mistakes in and I win, and soon enough you'll see some videos where I lose. So here we are in round 2, and I'm playing against Tymna and Crom. And you'll see Tymna show up again and again and again and again, because Tymna is currently the most busted commander. It doesn't matter which of the other 2 you pair it with, either Crom or Thrasios. Both decks are way too good because the partner mechanic's ridiculous, and also because Tymna itself is ridiculous. They banned Edric but left Tymna. Tymna is Edric. There's no difference between Tymna and Edric at the end of the day. Like, you're not going to draw like 5 cards like you would off of Edric, but you don't play Tymna that way. You just hit for a card, a card, a card, a card. And it's just ridiculous how absolutely threatening that is. My opponent, however, has a terrible hand. He pierced my early Signet, and then with my Duress, I see he's got all mana and an Oust. So I'm going to leave him with, I take out the Fire Covenant because it would kill all my Thopters, whereas the Oust only kills Breya, but I can have 2 blockers. And for tempo purposes, I'm going to Jace him, bounce his commander, and get more mana in play. Now this allows me to play Breya next turn with 6 mana up, so that if he tries to oust, I can just sack and kill his Tymna in response. Or if he goes for Crom, which would take all of his mana, then I can just kill it. So that was why I kind of ran it that way. There's no point in taking additional damage here. I should have Jaced first, in case that wasn't the play I wanted to make, although I was fairly certain it was. That's another mistake you can count for me. Alright, so he sends in here, so he's got something. I decide I'm going to go ahead and see what it is. And it is a Radiant Flame. So in response, I'll just go ahead and grab some life. And he just played he did not play a card that he had revealed to me earlier. This is a mistake on his part. If you show your opponent lands, always try to play the lands that you've shown them. Same for the cards. You know, try to keep as much mystery as you can. At any rate, I plus up my opponent and tuck a Toxic Deluge, which was really nice timing. I just had a hunch that it might be time. I'm going to Duress so that I can take that last removal card out of his hand, and he's left with just a bunch of mana. And I'm able to sit on a Cryptic. So I assume he's going to go for Crom here. He does. Because he's got to kill Jace, right? So we're going Going to try to counter that and then bounce the Snapcaster so that I can then Snapcaster Cryptic again. So I'm going to plus up. I see even more mana on top of his library, and at this point my opponent scoops, but you know, he's got 3 lands in hand, and I put the top card back on top. I guess he's just had enough, but I could have potentially Dust Bowled him here, but that just didn't make as much sense to me, and as just continuing to pick up counters. So that's what we went with here. All right, so this is round 3. And Thrasios Tymna, more Tymna, because they refuse to fix partners, and they won't do anything about Tymna, aka Edric. Alright, so I get an early good start. Take a Fatal Push over Dismember. That was probably a mistake, but honestly, like, they're both sort of mediocre against me. Here I'm having problems. I miss a land drop, but then again I do have Tide to recover a little bit. Problem is the curve. See, Tymna is so deadly that now I have to actually play a blocker. I can't even Tide because Tymna is incredibly threatening, and I end up leaving my opponent with Jitte Miscalculation, and I leave him with Jitte thinking he would equip there and swing, and I would at least be able to block and stall. He does not take the bait, so I'm going to go ahead and As Foretold and hope that I can generate enough free mana to dig my way out of this. My opponent's got an Ancestral Visions he was ticking up that finally fires. So like this just looks pretty much impossible to win. Alright, so he's sending in just him. He wants a card. I'm going to deny him the card even though he's already drawn a ton of them. I may regret that later, but play a free Expedition map. Scroll rack a bit. So I want to Breya, but I'd rather have better cards in my hand. So I go that route. I want a Breya, but I want to do it through an Expedition map. I know he has Miscalculation, so as much as I want to get Breya on the table, throwing it into a Miscalculation just didn't make any sense there. So this is all bad. My opponent has 2 unknowns, Miscalculation, Jitte, and everything you see on board there. So for my turn, I'm going to go ahead and sack the map. I waited so that I could pick up the Armageddon that I had put back, because I want Armageddon. I foresee that as being pretty much the only way that I can win this game, is just make it about Armageddon. Opponent goes for Miscalculation. I allow it. He screwed up big time. Did not pick up on what the Caverns would do, and I am very happy with that. So that's one less card I have to deal with. Very, very happy to see that. Alright, so my opponent decides he's going to just he's just going to Jitte and then try to Dromoka's command. He pumps his guy twice and then commands right into my Spell Snare that I get to play off As Foretold, which was huge because now he's got less counters. I'm going to go ahead and chump with the Flyer. If he wants to spend all of his counters to kill Breya, I'm happy with that. In 2 turns, Breya is free, or nearly free, and that's what I'm trying to play to, is getting that As Foretold to 4 counters. So for now, though, I can cast a Breya that can't be countered. So I'm going to do that. And I can play a land so that if he kills As Foretold, even though I have Armageddon in hand, so if he kills As Foretold, I could potentially draw a land and play Breya again if I need to. But also, because I can dig in response and possibly find a counterspell. And as it turns out, I do not. So here's 2 lands in my hand. I'm certain that I had shuffled those away, but okay, whatever. Opponent sends in. I definitely don't want him connecting with the Sword of Feast and Famine, but he's back to growing a Jitte. It's got 2 charge counters on it now. He's dividing up his equipment so that he's not so that he's not vulnerable. However, I'm able to play a free Cryptic Command, scroll rack into this here. I'm trying to get my stuff together here. I Stoneforge Mystic, and for now, because I'm going to Armageddon now before he can replay that sword, which will make it impossible for me to block. And I tutored up a Batterskull specifically because I decided I'm going to let this through. He's going to get to draw. It is a bit of a bummer, but now I get to play a Batterskull for free, and I have a pretty heavy wall of dorks out there to stop whatever aggression he might try to push through. And if he were to, if he doesn't do anything, then I get to play a free Izzet Signet, and then I get to play, you know, a free Skull Clamp. As soon as I find a mana, I get to start clamping Thopters and drawing cards. If I get up to 2 mana, of course, Breya's ability comes online, and anything I draw is free. So at this point in the game, so with all that in mind, my opponent scoops. So I managed to win an insane game that I probably shouldn't have won, or wouldn't have won in most cases, but luckily I was able to find a route there. So in round 4, for a change of pace, I'm playing against Timna. Oh, look, it's Timna. And unfortunately, I have to double mulligan into a 1-land hand and tuck a talisman that would have been amazing for me. If I would have been able to actually draw it in my opening hand like I should have, then I could have played it here, and I might have been okay, but instead, well, maybe I'll be okay anyhow. I do have this Duretti. And I make a mistake here. He attacks Duretti, and I chump. Protecting Duretti was not necessary there. I should have let it go, because then I want to sack my guy and kill his Timna. And that error may cost me big time, because he's got the Abrupt Decay follow-up, and now I'm down 1 creature, and 1 creature matters. Anyway, Bonus got a Sword of Fire and Ice, and you can see how it matters, because I don't have a colorless blocker right now. I can, so he fires off the Thopter, all my creatures are blue. I anguished that sword, but I'm just so far behind now on tempo. He's using, he's got Confidant rolling. He's found himself an Overgrown Tomb and an Oust, so he ousts Breya. I chump again, possibly a mistake. Maybe I should have just let him have his card. It just fairly hopeless at this point. I mean, I need a sweep, a spell sweeping effect. He drew a Duress there, and I don't have a target, so I'm hoping he does Duress me. That'll help make up for the disadvantage. So he gets Tamio down and taps 2 of my guys. Draws an extra card, plays Liliana of the Last Hope, so just all the bad planeswalkers. Unfortunately, it's kind of doesn't matter here. I could play Weathered Wayfarer, but then he just Liliana's it, and when he reveals a Spell Queller, I realize that there's absolutely no possible way that I can win this game at this point. Like, there really was nothing, but that's the power of Edric. I mean, Timna. Basically, Edric upgraded in better colors is what they did. They said Edric was too good, so we're going to print a better one and ban the first one. Frustrating. All right, well, and even if they would just fix the partner mechanic so we were balanced, then maybe Timna would be okay, but honestly, I don't see how, given that, like, my proposition is that either Timna and Edric are okay, or Timna and Edric are not okay. I still think the partner mechanic needs to be fixed, but those 2 cards, like, either, because they're basically the same card. You go first turn Mana Dork, second turn Timna, third turn you start drawing cards. It's the same curve with Edric. Alright, anyway, enough on that though. I'm playing against Call Me Dragon. He's running Kess, and I have a fairly decent opening hand, except it doesn't do anything. I duress and take the wrong card. I should have taken Factor Fiction, most likely, and just let him duress a card out of my hand, like he did. I took Gitaxian Probe. I took Probe because he was missing land, and then he top-decked Ancestral Vision immediately, followed by top-decking land. I was pretty disappointed by how this ended up. I thought that I could buy myself some time before the Factor Fiction would hit. So yeah, super disappointed in how this all worked out. And so his top decks were, if you were paying attention, Ancestral, Land, Tainted Pact. Just awful. So he packs into a land there, get probes on flashback, which makes it doubly bad that I had to that I discarded it or whatever. Anyway, I can't have Kess sitting on the board doing what it does, so I've got to get it off the board, so I immediately plow, which is bad for me because, again, like, I'm playing reactively. I'm not pressuring my opponent, he's pressuring me. Time Warp there is incredible for him because it lets him take a counter off Ancestral and play Kess if he wants. So I'm thinking Wasteland's good for me because it slows him down a bit. Opponent plays a Factor Fiction though, and I go for Breya because I figure he's going to counter. I know he's got the leak because I ended up giving him 2 lands and a leak, but if he counters it, then I can replay it with Workshop twice more, and so he throws away a Chain Lightning there. I'm not quite sure what that was about. I drew a Tithe, and I'm going to just continue to hammer away at his resources using the Workshop, powering Breya. He gets a Snapcaster counter again. But what he has in hand now, I know of, is an Underground Sea. It's the only card I know of that he's got. So I'm going to just close that out because we can remember Underground Sea, I think. And at this point, he's going to go for his commander, of course. Why not? Duress a Duretti out of my hand, which is incredibly painful. I do at least get to play a Tezzeret and then steal his Kess, which has some potential, but one of the unknowns was a Flame Slash, apparently, so That's not going anywhere. And then he gets a TNN down. All right, well, I don't really have any choice but to continue to try to grind at the hand with Breya. Luckily, I do have a mana leak in hand that I can use if I need to. I can pick up Workshop here and hide it from a Wasteland, which means I can play Breya 2 more times at least. Opponent goes for a Forbidden Alchemy, and since I can counter it, I will, because it's unlikely I'll be able to mana leak anything with the amount of mana he's got in play right now. And I don't expect to use Shackles. Think about what I should do here. If he's got a card like Pyroclasm, then I don't want to block. If he had a card like I don't know. Anyway, I don't want to block with Breya. I should have maybe blocked with the 1/1, but I was thinking I'd take his Snapcaster on the next turn and try to race him 6 damage to 3. But then he plays that Bedlam Reveler, which gives me it gives him more cards to draw, but it gives me a better target for the Shackles. So I take the Shackles. So my opponent's down to only 1 card in hand, and I have 2 in hand. It's the Workshop and... well, he's got Forbidden Alchemy, so he's got 2 in hand, technically. 2 available to him. I have 2 in hand, or available to me, because of the teachings. So I'll go ahead and teach. See if it resolves. It does. So I'm going to go get Perplex. And then, because I'm concerned with damage and trying to win, and I can't attack until it's gone, I can Perplex into Toxic Deluge. So you can see how Perplex turns Mystical Teachings into Toxic Deluge, which is a pretty nice effect. I get to bash, and now I actually have a path to victory, potentially. My opponent plays Chandra, however, and suddenly it's looking bad again. I can kill it, most likely, but it's just not looking good. Especially because I'm holding a Disenchant that appears like it's going to be a completely dead card in this event. And then he takes another turn, which is very, very bad for me, because it means another activation of Chandra and more digging into attack Faden. Oh, goodness. All right, well, I'll sack what he targets, and I'm going to actually sack, I think, the artifact mana there so that I can... and I screw up. I should have killed Dak Faden there probably, but I go ahead and ding Chandra. He plays Kess, and then... wait, did you catch that? He plays Kess, and then with an empty hand, he Ancestrals out of the graveyard, which is cheating. You can't do that. You can play an Ancestral if you have, as foretold, you have an alternate cost, and you have something like Yawgmoth's Will running, and possibly even Kess plus Ancestral Vision, I believe, will work. But just outright playing a card with no casting cost is impossible. It doesn't matter where you're playing it from, it's impossible. You need an alternate method to play it. So my opponent just cheated there and drew 3 extra cards, drew 3 cards, and at that point I'm buried. I top deck an useless Ancestral for me. I mean, I can play Breya, I can kill Dak or Chandra, I can kill his commander though. I mean, I don't know what to do at this point. Opponent's now got 4 cards in hand, gets a Cryptic down, bounces his Dak, steals my Breya. Yeah, whatever. Good job, cheater. You win. It wasn't like the game was... it wasn't like he wasn't so far already incredibly far ahead that he needed to cheat there. So he's really disappointed by that. So I reported it. So if you do see somebody cheat, you should report it. Kess will also allow, unless they patched it, you to cast Instants on your opponent's turn. He didn't do that, which was nice, unless they patched it. I haven't played with Kess in a while. But yeah, this is just one of those deals that it's not good. It's not okay to do. You shouldn't cheat. I don't know why it needs to be said, but my opponent, as a reward for cheating, moved to the finals. Me, I got 10th place. So he knocked me out of top 8 contention with that move. A very, very scummy and unfortunate thing to have happen. Anyway, so last round I'm playing against Tweedle with Sidisi Undead Vizier. And I've got a very nice fast start, which is important against that commander. And look at that, a main deck. Well, of course main deck, there's no sideboard, but a defense grid. So, I mean, because he's obviously playing combo. Fortunately, I've got a tremendous ramp, but then my opponent slows it way down with a Wasteland. So what I'm going to try and do is Kaya and I'm going to try to get some card advantage here. Now I'm really glad for the Disenchant. So I'm able to produce even more mana and disenchant away his arena. He could activate Guardian Idol, but I was banking on him not killing Kaya here and going for his commander. Instead he goes for Grim Tutor, which as long as he doesn't kill Kaya, I am happy with whatever he did, because if you notice now, that defense grid, well, that's not going to defend him from a 6 mana Cryptic. So I Cryptic Buried Alive because Buried Alive is the key card. That's the card that Sidisi tutors for. That's how they win the game. They just combo you out with infinite, well, with all the damage that they could ever possibly want. So, but because Kaya's been taking lands out of my opponent's hand and making it harder and harder for him to play, so I actually thought about Dust Bowling a Peat Bog here, which is crazy, but then decided I was going to dig for counters. I do not find one. So instead I just get my scroll rack down so that way next turn I can look at a whole glut of 16 cards. I have 8 cards in hand. Kaya's going to make it 9, and then I can scroll rack and make it even more. Or at least that was the game plan. But then I realized my opponent's taken so much damage. He had Dark Petitioned for a Infernal Contract in order to try to get back in the game. Drew 4 cards and lost half his life. At that point he'd taken so much damage that I could just sack my artifacts and win. I didn't even need to draw, what would that have been? 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah, 8 plus Kaya would have been 9, and then I could have looked at 9 new cards, so a grand total of 18 cards, the best of 18 that turn. I also could have equipped Sword and smashed with it there, but the thing was, my opponent's defense grid here meant that I didn't have to worry about anything he could possibly do, so I didn't need to, durdle around. I just kill him. He's got a defense grid. It's safe. So that's it. 6 games, unfortunately 4-2. There was a cheater round in there, and there's a lot of Tymna out there. That's all I can say. The card's broken. It's been broken forever. Tymna and Crom was a problem. Tymna and the other one's a problem. Tymna's been a problem in basically every deck that it shows up in, but for the same reasons Edric is a problem. But again, whatever. It's basically Edric, except you get to play better colors and a second commander in case that wasn't good enough. It's totally absurd. Alright, so moving on though, I am going to get off that and show you this game against Dorthon where I finally drew... and literally, like, here, let's go back really quick. Today. So I've been playing since 12:30. I literally drew Karn for the first time in this last game. So let's take a look at it and find out how good he might actually be. Right, so my opponent's playing Joyra, Weatherlight Captain. Whenever you cast a historic spell, draw a card. So artifacts will draw cards. That's actually a very interesting card for Breya, potentially. I don't know, though. 4 mana drawing cards may not be where I want to be. So anyway, I've got a weird start. I really, really wanted to draw a land right there for fairly obvious reasons, right? I was going to As Foretold Ancestral. Luckily, I didn't, and I drew one the next turn, so I'm able to counter his commander, draw 3, and I thought, well, I won't see it for a while. This is going to be good. And then my opponent just goes ape with mana. So here I have a Karn, but I have to wait because I need to keep Joyra off the board, obviously. I don't want him going on a joyride over there. And he plays Dark Fade, and I screw up really, really, really badly. So he pluses it up, and I accidentally auto-yield, and he slams the ready, cheating a combustible Gearhulk into play, and all I had to do was Spell Pierce off the As Foretold and counter the Duretti. So now I've got to fix yet another mistake. So today's been a day of misplays, poor play, pretty much everything. First thing I had to do is kill Dark Fade and then eat damage. But As Foretold's almost where I need it to be, so I'm going to go ahead and Pithing Needle Duretti, so that problem's taken care of now. And finally, let's cast Karn and see what happens. Well, first of all, instead of clamping the construct, I'm going to make a 6/4 giant thing. And then I looked at it and said, oh, right, he's got first strike, but maybe he isn't paying attention. Either way, I don't want to clamp the construct there because then I'd have to chump with the other construct, with Karn's construct. I don't want to clamp the ready token, basically to distinguish them all, describe it that way. Alright, so chump block, no problem. I am at 12 also, so that is a factor. Alright, free Breyas, and that is now an 8/6. I have to fetch some mana because I have a play here which is going to be kill Joyra, kill your guy with Breya, use the power of Mishra's Workshop to recast Breya. and Karn a guy. And yeah, I've got an 8-8 and 9-7. How absurd! I'm gonna go ahead and attack Duretti just for safety's sake. I don't. I'm gonna go face very soon. Believe me. All right. So my opponent plays Sundering Titan. Interestingly enough, hurts me almost not at all, and is about to hurt him. Right. So he kills 3 of my lands, but he's gonna lose 2 of his. And I've been trying to mana pinch him to make this stupid spell pierce in my hand that I should have had out of it. Good. So I go ahead and plus Karn. He exiles a Sword of Feast and Famine and gives me a wonderful mana source to use off of Karn. As you can see, I've fixed the artifact in his deck the way that they should be. Boom. Lose 2 lands. Disenchant your other thing there. Equip, mash, and holy crap, that's a lot of damage. Oh my gosh, Karn is off the chain in this deck. Take a billion damage. So he went from... I actually didn't even have to dink around with any of the stuff I just did. I probably could have just disenchanted Sundering Titan, smashed his face, and then sacked and killed him, but oh, what the heck. Look at that insanity, though. Karn produced 16 points. This card functioned like a Phyrexian processor that didn't cost me life and drew me a card, and is about to draw me more cards. The next time I use it, I'm not going to -1 for the sword. I would plus it again and produce and spit out another 8/8 a turn after that. Like, even if my opponent clears my board, let's say with some kind of crazy Wrath of God effect, if it's not like Vandal Blast, Skull Clamp, Jitse, this thing, he's still spitting out a 4/4, and if I recast Breya, he's kicking out 7/7s. Like, that is absurd. So I love Karn. I am very pumped about it. Works amazingly well in here from what I can tell, but again, that's just one game, but boy, does that ever look exciting to me. Super problematic card, I think, for opponent's staff to deal with. Now you might be asking, why am I not using Mox Amber, which is the other card from the new set that really stands out. There are also a couple of cards that look pretty good if your deck can support them. I really like the Wizard counterspell that's blue 1, costs 1 less if you control a wizard. And I actually do have wizards in here. I've got Trinket Mage, I've got Dark Confidant, Snapcaster Mage. Those are all wizards, but there aren't enough, and a 3-mana counter that's sometimes 2 mana, if I'm going to use one at all in this deck, would be the Metalcraft one first. So that would be a second string to the Metalcraft one, and I'm not even using the Metalcraft one. If you think you don't need the mana sources here, then you could put those 2 counters in. That might be something that could happen. But I actually think the mana sources are probably pretty important with the way that Workshop just functions and the way that the deck plays out in general. So that's all I've got for you, but hopefully you enjoyed those games. And I mean, to be fair, in that game against Call Me One Dragon, Call One Me One Dragon, something like that, he said he didn't know how it works. Problem is, then after drawing the cards, he didn't say, like, okay, I just won't play these and at least try to fix it. He then proceeded to win the game with them and move on throughout the rest of the tournament. All he had to do as soon as he accidentally cheated was either try not to use them, or he could have just conceded because he just cheated. I wish there was a judge we could call and we could reverse it, but then he would have seen the top 3 cards of his deck anyway. So in a real tournament, if you don't know what your cards do and you cheat like that and you draw 3 cards you're not eligible to draw by misrepresenting how your cards work, that's a loss. That's a game loss and a warning or worse. So for some reason, Magic Online, though, is like, hey, yeah, why don't you go ahead and make it to the top 8 as your punishment? So crazy and disappointing, but what can I do? Report it, drive on, get over it, and that's what I've done pretty much. But exciting stuff. Hopefully you enjoyed this. I think this is I'm doing my best to evolve the 1v1 Breya list so that it's playable and we have something we can do, despite Wizard's best attempts to crap all over like my playstyle. As much as I hate Tymna, I will say this: if they were to ban Breya, I would switch to Tymna and Crom and continue playing the same deck. Basically, I might make some tweaks, but for all intents and purposes, it'd be the same deck. It just would lose that. It would lose a few things and pick up a few things in order to adapt, which wouldn't be pleasant. I wouldn't like that at all. But there are ways alternately, maybe the deck would switch over to like a Kess version, but I don't think so because Armageddon feels really important right now. So hopefully they don't outright ban Breya. I don't think. I know that it's banned in some 1v1 formats, but honestly, like it's like, do you see any other control decks? Like all the blue decks are just combo decks. From what I can tell, they're all revolve around High Tide, and the mono black decks don't play mono black control. They play mono black combo. The green decks, for the most part, are just big ramp into basically combo. They're like everyone's just playing combo, so we need some health for the format. You need control to counteract that nonsense, and Breya I think is the best bet, but the control game has been massively impacted by the loss of Winter Orb. It is such a brutal, like, opposition can do as much or more than an orb can do in the right circumstances, but you can't just get it. You can't just go get it. You can't muddle for it. You can't whir for it. You can't mystical teachings or, you know, into one of those other cards in order to produce the Winter Orb. You can't Tezzeret into it, and that was the key. It was being able to just drop the Orb Hammer at the appropriate time. Without being able to do that, it's just so much worse, so much worse. But I don't think it's impossible. So let me know what you think, and thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the games. I'll see you next time.